So welcome to Monitoring Student Wellbeing in Lockdown and Beyond. My name is Lauren Bridge and I'm the Executive Officer of the Alliance of Girls' Schools Australasia. Thanks for both joining us today and for what you've been doing during this pandemic. Everything from embracing online learning to supporting parents and now, of course, navigating the return to school. I think that teachers have truly stepped up to the plate and responded magnificently. And of course, your interest in today's session on wellbeing just amplifies that. So today it is a terrific session, monitoring student wellbeing. We have Dr. Joe Thurburn, Chief Technology Officer at Educator Impact, and he's going to walk us through their revolutionary digital wellbeing platform called Pulse. So unlike traditional wellbeing surveys, Pulse provides weekly check-ins with students, monitors wellbeing in real time, and it's the only solution that enables at-risk students to actually ask for help if they need it. So those are pretty big words from Educator Impact. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how that does play out. And joining Joe is Kelly Lynham, Deputy Principal of Corowa Anglican Girls' School in Melbourne, and Darren Cox, Principal of St Philip's Christian College in Cessnock, New South Wales. And both these schools have been trialling Pulse and they're going to share their experiences with us today. So Joe, can I hand over to you now?
Certainly can, Lauren. Thank you very much. And let me just quickly share my screen, if I may. And then start this. And away we go. So Lauren, thank you very much for that introduction. They are big words, they're words we stand behind. And I would also like to say that we've been involved with AGSA for quite a few years now. And the hit rate on having a really smooth presentation or a smooth event is continuing, even in these times where it's almost unheard of. This webinar is all about some early findings from the first couple of schools who have gone live with EI Pulse, which is our new program to monitor and then support student wellbeing. I'd like to give before I really get into it, I'd like to really thank Darren and Kelly for participating. Combined, they represent about 10 years experience as being EI customers, and for that, I apologise. But it's also given us about 10 years of experience getting to know the schools, and I can tell you it came as zero surprise to us that when we asked schools to participate early, that amongst the first hands in the class that went up were from Darren and Kelly. So thank you both for that. It's really appreciated. And it's really clear to us working with you for such a long time that the schools are really innovative. They really have an innovative approach to delivering education to their students, and it's an absolute pleasure to work with them. I am Joe Thurburn. In 2014, I was lucky enough to be one of the co-founders of what we call the Good Ship Educator Impact. Some of you will already know us from our existing PD programs, EI for teachers, EI for leaders, EI for support staff. Over the last 6 years, we've, I think, established ourselves as experts in measurement, but measurement with real purpose. And that purpose is to build a supportive culture of change within schools. So last year, we embarked on what we thought was a really ambitious program. And that was to obviate the traditional approach to measuring student wellbeing. And you know the one that I mean. It's you get all the students together in the hall and you administer long form, anonymous, comprehensive surveys annually, maybe twice a year if you're lucky. And what we wanted to replace it with was a system that was so easy to use that students could check in every week and it would take them less than 60 seconds. And so that's what we built. But beyond the research and all the statistics, there's a totally human reason that we really decided that this program was something we had to get involved in. I'll share one of those stories. We had a school go live last week. They started rolling out the program on Monday, and on the Wednesday, the contact from the school rang us with this story. He said that they had 2 students. Those students were really struggling during the lockdown, and although those students really knew that they felt bad enough to seek help, they didn't know either how or who to ask. And so when Pulse rolled out, the very first thing that they did was to seek help using the platform. Now, it's a really simple story, but it's one that stopped us in our tracks. It's the potential for this kind of impact that really got us started, and we call it internally, it's our big why. Right? There are also hundreds of other much smaller whys, and although there are hundreds of them, I'd like to share 3 with you just before we get started. And the reason I want to share this particular 3 is because they were fundamental in shaping the way that we built the program. and therefore they're fundamental in understanding the story of how these schools have first experienced the program. So our journey started with student wellbeing almost by accident. And it's sort of almost by accident on the phone. So let me just get rid of that. I'm back. Okay, so sorry about that. Our journey started almost by accident, and it happened when Mark Staker from Winona College shared with us their pastoral care framework for their students. And that started a flurry of research internally for us. We started talking to schools and we started reading. And we read about all sorts of things. We read about school approaches, and we read about research into student wellbeing, and we read about wellbeing frameworks, and we read about national health referral services. The list just kept on growing. And so it was no wonder that, given the high stakes and complexity, that student mental health issues are the fastest growing cause of job response principles, and that they rate ahead of things like responding to critical incidents and declining enrolments and interpersonal conflicts. So there's no question that this is important. But the thing that we found was, inside all of that complexity, there are two simple truths about student wellbeing. The first is, for a school, it's all about understanding what the day-to-day life of your students is like, and then using data to improve that week to week, month to month, year to year. Even more importantly, for individual students, it's about identifying those students who are having trouble and then connecting those students with the support that's most likely to help. So when we decided to build our system, we wanted to make it one that actually helps schools monitor and then respond to student wellbeing issues. But if it was going to do so, it would have to satisfy three competing issues. The first is that if you're going to collect student wellbeing data, you have to do it comprehensively enough that the schools get the data they need to be proactive. But what I mean by proactive is you have to collect enough data to let the schools design initiatives around that data to respond. The second thing you have to do is to collect the data frequently, which stands in real tension with having it comprehensive. And the reason you need to collect it frequently is that we know that early intervention into student issues can dramatically improve their effectiveness. It's impossible to do this using an annual survey-based approach, but using our pulse-based approach, we can be comprehensive and we can be frequent, and we can catch students at the time that they're having troubles. And that's so we can support them, because the system has to allow students to reach out for support. That is, the students, and the reason we know that that is the case, we know that the system has to be designed carefully and has to support it, is that we know that students exhibit help-seeking behaviour when two things happen at the same time. The first is the student has to feel bad enough to understand that they need to seek help. And the second is that the student has to feel safe enough that the avenue that they're going to go and reach out for help with is one that they trust. Those two things happening at the same time are the fundamental reasons that crisis intervention services are designed, like Lifeline, are designed in the way that they are. When I did the Lifeline telephone counselling training about 20 years ago, that was the fundamental thing that I didn't understand. It's about the transience of issues in wellbeing sometimes. So in summary, we wanted to build a system that was supportive for the students, that allowed teachers to be responsive, that collected enough quality data to allow schools to be proactive in managing the wellbeing of their students. Now, of course, all of that research doesn't count for anything if the students don't actually adopt the program. And so we had three design goals when we turned those ideas into a program. And the first was it had to be so easy to use that students can get finished with a check-in in less than a minute, if they want to. Also, second, it has to reach them in their native environment, which is probably a phone, although actually I'm not entirely sure if there's some new device that I don't understand yet because I'm too old. Certainly there are websites that I don't understand, like TikTok, but anyway. But we have to find students in their native environment. And the third is that students have to trust it. And to trust it, they have to know where their data goes. They have to know what happens when they ask for help. And they have to feel like it's a part of their regular experience at the school. This is one of the fundamental problems with annual surveys. We've talked to a lot of students about this, and it just feels like a special thing. And rather than feeling like a special thing, if you do things regularly, it will feel like part of the furniture. So let me very briefly show you what we've built. When a student commences using AI Pulse, when a school commences using AI Pulse, we work with the school to work out a schedule. And that schedule fits in around the pastoral care framework at the school. So if all of the students go to the same support, like go to their homerooms or go to their pastoral care classes at the same time, then we fit that schedule for the school around there. But what it does is prompts students once a week to check in and tell us how they're feeling. A few days later, if they haven't checked in, it will remind them. So they get at most 2 interruptions a week. And the first question we always ask is what we call internally the big question. It's really simple. It's how are you feeling today? Students will answer on a 5-point scale, as you can see. Some of the students will be feeling great, some will be feeling positive, and there will be some who need to seek help, and this is where they do it. But for the vast majority of students who are feeling okay today, we go on to part 2, which is we ask them 5 questions which are drawn from the ERACI framework, the common approach. I'll talk about ERACI a little bit later, but their framework's wonderful. They're absolutely sensational to deal with. Those 5 questions that we ask the students range from things like how they're, if they have the material basics they need to be a student, if they feel valued and safe, if they feel healthy, all those sorts of things. And some questions around their sentiment about the school as well. 60% of the students get to the end of the check-in within the first minute, and 90% of the students are finished within 2. There are some students who feel like they need a little bit more time to think or a little bit more time before they are willing to share, and that's absolutely fine. For those small number of students who do need help, it's really important for them that they can reach a specific trusted individual. So they're not asking the system for help, they're asking a person for help. And again, we work in with the school to build it in such a way that students will ask for help in a way that's familiar with them. Could be through the pastoral care system, it could be through the house system, it could be through the year system. It really depends what the school has set up, and we build it based on that. But what is really important is that the student has a choice. If it's their default person, that's fine. It takes them 2 seconds to work out. If it's somebody else, they can click down here and get a list of people they might wish to talk to. And in less time than it has taken me to explain it, every student in your school has checked in, giving you a cross-section of all of the data from those 5 questions. For teachers, there's 2 real things that they can do. The first is, and the teachers find this, well, one teacher found it a revelation, was their word to use, but being able to look across the cohort of students who they are personally responsible for and understand how they are going at a glance. The data is in their pocket and it's always up to date. So they can see on the left here, across the students that they're responsible for, about 12 have checked in, 2 of them are feeling great, 5 are feeling positive, but there are 2 who aren't feeling really that good. You can check in and get an sort of a bird's eye view of how your whole cohort is feeling. And if you wanted to check right down to the individual, not only do you get how they're feeling this week, but you get a picture of the trajectory that they've been experiencing over the week, over the weeks leading up to this moment. So it's really helpful for teachers to understand the context, especially if Sarah in this case has reached out to their teacher. Their teacher can then really understand how Sarah's been tracking over the couple of weeks and understand if the conversation they're about to have is going to be about a long-standing issue or one that's really just come up. For school leaders, we provide cohort level data that lets them understand their school on the left through the lens of the ERACI wellbeing framework. So there's 6 areas. The first one's valued and safe. The second one's healthy, and so on through the material basics and so on through all of those different aspects of wellbeing. It lets the school leaders understand a snapshot of now and also the trajectory of that through the school. We expect that in a dynamic school environment, exam times are going to be a really interesting period, and things like, I don't know, a COVID lockdown will also be things that put stress on students, and you'll probably see that data change over time. The comprehensiveness of the data is obtained through putting together all of those individual small responses and laddering them up into something that's statistically significant. But it's also really easy for the leaders over time to drill down and look how things are going, either for a particular house or a particular year level, or even a particular class. So that's the tool. It doesn't take very long to show because it is designed from the beginning to be extremely simple. But as simple and as, and I'm going to call out our visual designer here, as simple and as beautiful as the tool is, the big why is what matters. The impact, the meaningful impact that we can have on the wellbeing of students. And we can't tell you what that's like until we've actually tried it out. And the 3 factors that we really can't answer until we put it into the hands of students and teachers are these. The first is, will the students engage? Will the students log on the first time they get a link, and will they keep on logging in after, week on week? The second is, will the students reach out? Will they trust the system enough to actually use it to ask for help when they need it? And the third is, does it give schools data that they can use to start acting and responding, both responsively and proactively around issues of student wellbeing. And so on that note, I would really like to hand over to first Darren and then Kelly, and they'll give you a little bit of an insight into how that's worked for their schools. And so Darren, I'm going to put myself on mute, hopefully, or maybe not, but I'll be quiet.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, well, good afternoon, everyone. Really good to meet you. I promise that I won't duck out for a few minutes like Joe needed to get himself a cup of tea. I'll stay with you for my section of time. You can see there on the screen just a little bit of a snapshot of some of the images from our school. We're a regional school in the Hunter Valley of New South Wales. We have 1,100 students here, and Pulse really just complements our proactive approach to wellbeing. And like every other school, we've got different elements of that, whether it be in the natural environment, whether it be in the man-made environment, whether it be in the programs or in the people and the resources that we invest into wellbeing. This is a significant aspect of who we are and what we really believe in for our children. And so, like all of us, the wellbeing of our students is absolutely at the heart of who we are as educators and who we are as leaders. And so I first heard about Pulse last year at the AHESA conference. Joe and his team had a stand set up, and I thought, what product are they going to try and sell me this time? Because for the last 10 years, they've been trying to sell me products. And so I sort of avoided them at that point in time until late in term 4, we had a further conversation about it. And so when we presented this to our leadership team, it was almost like, well, why wouldn't we go ahead with this? And so we then got the ball rolling, and we commenced using Pulse in about week 6 or week 7 of term 1. So slightly before we actually all went into lockdown, and this was a plan for us for this program, for this app to complement what we're actually doing in the school. And since then, the feedback on actually using Pulse has just been incredibly positive. All the things that Joe talked about in his presentation are exactly what our experiences have been with our young people. It is easy to use. They do engage with it. So I think the latest statistic from the week just gone was that 80% of our students have actually engaged with the app and actually used Pulse as a check-in. And so that's 80% of our students have actually taken the opportunity very quickly and easily to let someone know how they're doing. And we all know so many times we walk past or we'll see, whether it be adults or whether it be students, say, how are you doing? And okay is just the natural default answer. And actually what this allows students to do is actually say, yeah, I really am okay. Or actually, I'm not doing that great. And they know that someone there is there to really reach out and engage with them. And so often we expect students to come to us into our world of whether it walk down the corridor to the counsellor's office or go to see the chaplain, or they've got to make a real effort and a real conscious decision as to where they're going to go out of their way to engage with an adult to talk about their well-being. And it's not a natural conversation. It's not, you're not at recess in the queue for the canteen, not feeling wonderful. And actually, I'm going to take myself off. It actually, that's a big step for a young person. And the beauty of this app is actually, it's really confidential. It's really simple. They can do it wherever they are. They can do it during class. They can use it when they're at home. And so to see that 80% of our students have reached out really does reinforce just how easy to engage with it is. And in that, what our staff have done, we actually had 2 young people reach out who said, I actually need help. And they were 2 new people that hadn't actually registered on any of our wellbeing radars before. They hadn't met with any of our counselling team or our wellbeing team. And so if for nothing else, actually, it's been worth it for those 2 young ladies who've been able to reach out and actually now have some conversation about how they're doing and what's the situation there for them. Our pastoral care teachers have started to use the data, albeit we're sort of, we're really a month into our using it, but actually what they've been able to do even in pastoral care times is draw on the students who said they're doing well and say, okay, why are you doing well? What are you doing that's actually putting you in that space? And so almost as a form of peer support in that area, if a young person's able to say, actually, I'm feeling pretty good this week because, I don't know, I've been turning my phone off earlier at nighttime, or I started going for walks in the morning because they were always on to me, or I cut down screen time and started reading, whatever it be, that actually gives some of their peers in their pastoral care class some ideas as to, oh, they seem to be doing okay. Gosh, maybe there's some strategies that I could also implement. So it actually gets students at really both ends of how they're doing on that first screen that Joe showed. The other thing that we've been able to do is drill down into actually how they're going with different aspects of school. And we saw that where Joe showed a couple of snapshots of that. And so, you know, one of the things that has come up for us is last week it said that students were worried about school. Well, now because we've seen that tracking, and we've seen that actually as they click through a couple of the questions, they're worried about school. Now what that allows our partial care teachers to do is to just very naturally have that conversation during a partial care time, is to say, hey, how are we feeling about being back at school now? Who's concerned about that? What may be some of your concerns, etc. And we can actually speak into it from a sense of actually now we can hear some student voice. And in our approach to wellbeing, this is the one time that we actually do get to hear from them what they enjoy about school, what they're enjoying in their own healthy emotions, what they're feeling in their connectedness to school. They can do it somewhat anonymously. They don't have to do it in a public forum. And it's really easy for them to just give some feedback to the school on how they're going in that space. So yes, their own well-being, but to connect it to that is actually how they're going at school and things like that. And so we've been able to use it quite successfully through our partial care program. We actually had 15% of students use it, engage with the app during the holiday. I probably would have liked that number to have been a little higher, but we'd only sort of been involved with it for sort of 2-3 weeks at that stage. And so as a school, one of the next things we're trying to really work out there in our own processes is if a student reaches out for help, you know, outside of school hours, whatever they really are for school leaders. But if a student reaches out for help outside of those school hours, how do we then deal with that, and how do we process that, and what are our systems going to be in order to be able to follow up with that young person? So there's some of the things that we're still working through as a leadership team as to what our responsibilities are and how we can engage with young people that way. But the feedback from the students has been excellent. The families, we started this, and then basically a week or 2 weeks later, we went into COVID lockdown, and the families were just so grateful that the school had even considered their well-being when they weren't going to be at school and provided them an easy access tool to engage with. A lot of conversation around what does online learning look like, how's our online learning platform. Well-being is, if not more important than their learning. If they're not in that healthy space, then the learning's really going to suffer. And so our parents were just so grateful that there was going to be that regular check-in. Yeah, they would have their Zoom partial care meetings, but actually beyond that next step. And I come back to what I started with. Our leadership team almost said, well, why wouldn't we do this? Because we want to know how our students are going. And as Joe said, you know, we used to do the Mind Matters surveys and the other surveys that we've done. There's, what else have we used? Gallup surveys and things like that. But they're once a year, they're twice a year. And this is just ongoing. It's regular. The students have been using it really proactively. We get a lot of take up with it. And we've been able to really support a number of students. So in the last sort of month, we've had 10 students who have said, I need help. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 of those were students that we had not heard of before. And as a school leader, I come back to, I would do anything for the one. Like every single student matters. It's not about the corporate numbers. It's not about, you know, all the extra programs and things that we put on. It's about that one student. And if we've been able to minister, if we've been able to speak into one life in a way that actually that person may not have received before, well, then for me, it's been worth it. And we've had 2 already. And so for me, I'm really grateful that there's something like this that is just accessible for students. So that's just a really brief snapshot of where we've been able to use it. Our pastoral care teachers have been able to speak into it. Our year leaders sit down, they look at the data, what's this tell us about? And so at their year leader meetings, when they're talking about how different areas of the school are going, we've actually now got some real data from student voice that we can then speak into and shape pastoral care programs, shape what we do at assemblies, what else do we need to do to create connectedness, et cetera, and it's there and it's live. So I'm really grateful to Joe and the team, and that's been a really positive experience for our school. So I just wanted to share that with you this morning, and at any stage, I'm more than happy to answer questions that you may have as to practically, drill down a little bit further as to how we've implemented it further on in the school. So thank you to Joe, and thank you to everyone else, and all the best as you transition into an unbelievable world of education at the moment.
Oh, well, thank you, Darren. I hadn't heard Darren's talk before, and that's, as I say, I find it really rewarding hearing the stories from the school. It's just incredible. So on that note, I'd like to ask Kelly to take us through how things are going at Corolla.
Absolutely. So Corowa is an ELC to Year 12 girls' school in Glen Iris, just outside of Melbourne. And as Lauren said earlier today, we've been part of the Alliance for a really long time. And we're really grateful to have the opportunity to share with you what we've been experiencing with Pulse to date. We're a slightly different context in that we only are in our 4th week of collecting data from the students via Pulse. And you'll know if you're in Victoria that we are in our 5th week of term distance learning mode. Corowa went into distance learning mode the final week of term 1. And we were invited to participate in this pilot in the holidays. So that's sort of the context in terms of the beginning of our journey. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about where we were at the time, and then how we've been able to use the data and the experience of Pulse this term. So when we knew that we were going to be in distance learning mode for an extended period of time, like all of you, we started to research to work out the best way in which we could make sure that our girls remain connected with their peers and with their teachers in the distance learning mode. And it became really clear to us that we needed to find a way to make the students visible to us, because we know that through relationships and through being able to assess the girls visually, we're able to understand really quickly in many cases how they're travelling. And we were quite worried about how we were going to do that when we have the screens in between us. So we wanted to find a way that would help us with that. So our research led us to understand 3 things, and these 3 things came to underpin our distance learning approach, if you like. So the first was that, just like with face-to-face practice, an integrated approach to wellbeing was really essential for our girls. And so we took on the every child, every day mantra, and we built into our distance learning plan that every teacher who was scheduled to teach a student that day would physically take the time in their lesson to look at their student and connect with them individually as part of lesson time. We also knew that human interactions in the online space influence a positive sense of community. So we asked our teachers to make sure that in every lesson they built in time for student-teacher interaction as well as student-student interaction. And then thirdly, we know that positive self-esteem can be directly correlated to our students' success in this distance learning space. So we asked our teachers to continue to be really mindful of existing wellbeing issues and report any concerns that they might have straight away. And our distance learning lesson structure was bookended by face-to-face check-ins with the students. So we have a check-in at the beginning of every distance learning lesson, and we have encouraged our teachers to take on activities inspired by Dr. Lee Waters' work around visible wellbeing, so the positive primer check-in. And then at the end of the lesson, we've encouraged our teachers to build in brain breaks. So that's sort of the context where we had found ourselves at this point in time when we started to talk to Jo about what Pulse could help us do. And we realised that what was missing in our plan was that there was no self-report mechanism for students. So we had mapped out the best way we could in this environment to check in with each of our girls every day, multiple times a day, but we didn't have a mechanism for the students to easily self-report other than go out of their way, as was said before, to go and find an adult who could help them. So we really quickly jumped on the opportunity to pilot Pulse to help us to build that visibility and give the students the opportunity to self-report. And so, like I said, we're only in our 4th week of collecting data, and I wanted to let you know that we've had an increased number of students each week engage in this. We, like all schools, have been collecting data on our students around wellbeing for a long time, but this is a very quick and easy way for the students to share with us their thoughts, and so they are absolutely coming to the party as we go. And I wanted to let you know that I made the decision to give my wellbeing staff the latitude to determine how they would respond to the data in each area of the school. And I thought it might be helpful for you to hear how our teams have approached that across the school. So our wellbeing support services team, made up of our school counsellor, our educational and developmental psychologist, and our school chaplain, have used the data to check in on the students on their caseload list. And they've been looking for whether or not the responses are perhaps what they would expect, or whether the responses are different to what they would expect, or in some cases, if they're not responding, whether that's something we need to be thinking about. And they found that to be really helpful to kind of support or reinforce their understanding of how that student's travelling in this mode. And I'm sure, like you, we've been really pleased to see that some of our students who we thought might struggle are actually almost flourishing, you could say, in this space. And so this is another piece of data that supports that. But then on the flip side, of course, there are some students who don't find distance learning to be a positive experience for them at all. So this reinforces that. And one really positive thing that's come out of polls for our wellbeing support services team is that they have been actively reaching out to the students in their care through the last 5 or so school weeks. And some students, unsurprisingly, adolescent girls don't always respond to these requests. But what we found is that whilst they might not have responded to our school counsellor's invitation to connect, they've let us know via polls that they've not been travelling well and that they need help. So they're using this as a different way of reaching out to us, which is really positive. Our senior years team have been starting their conversations with the head of senior years and the year level coordinator each week to look at who's on the list of where they're sitting, whether they're in that red zone, green zone, etc., and whether that matches what we would expect for that student and whether there's been a change in pattern. And then they've been determining on an individual basis what the intervention for that student will be. So that's been a senior years approach. In our middle years program, our years 7 and 8, a team similarly have been looking at the data each week together, and then they've been utilising our community structure, which is a crew style wellbeing structure, those sessions to address some of the issues that might be coming through the data, as well as asking community teachers to check in with an individual student who perhaps has moved from one zone to another. And of course, we've been checking in with every student who's been specifically asking us for help. And in the junior years, our head of junior school has been watching carefully how the girls have been responding and then engaging in conversations with subject teachers to see whether there are any anomalies, to see whether what we're seeing in the pulse data is reflected in what we're seeing in terms of the girls' behaviour in classes, as well as what the parents might be reporting. And again, individualised interventions are being put in place for those younger students who I'm sure you can appreciate, like for us, perhaps like you, are really looking forward to being back together with their friends. And so this is such a strange environment for them. We have had a really positive response from our staff to having access to this data, and we've been talking with Jo about some ways we'd like to be able to use it in the future. We're really looking forward to the possibility of being able to track the students' responses in a longitudinal way so that we can see whether there are any patterns in their responses and whether there are any pressure points, perhaps in relation to what's happening in the community or what's happening in our school calendar, to see whether there's a rise and fall against what the girls are experiencing here at school, of course at home at the moment. And we're also looking forward to being able to drill down to that class level so that we can put in place really distinctive interventions to a particular concern that might be being raised by a particular class. So as I said at the outset, we're really in the early stages, but we're so grateful that we've had the opportunity in this distance learning mode to have another tool in our toolkit to support the students and to track and monitor them. And as we prepare for the students to return, we started to think about how can we make sure that we have high levels of engagement. And we're asking the question, should we build this into our wellbeing time? That's something that you just do each week when you come in. We're not sure yet, but we'll let you know how that goes. So thanks very much, Jo.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. That's really interesting again. I'm just we do want to go to Q&A. I'm seeing lots of questions come through. Before I do, I just want to make 2 very quick points. So the first is there is an offer out for AGS for schools to use our student wellbeing platform, and that still stands, of course. Since COVID hit maybe harder and longer than some people were expecting, we've deepened our relationship with Eracy, and we've formed an alliance with the Flourish movement and Amazon Web Services, and we're able to offer broader than AGSA, but to every school in Australia. We think this is really important. We think it's really fundamental, and so we'll have a specific remote learning version of the platform available from the middle of this term. We'll have a staff wellbeing version of this platform available from the start of term 3, and Amazon, and they're both made possible by Flourish and Eracy donating their IPM frameworks. We will donate all of our IP and technology for this as well. The only thing that we're asking schools to do is, if they can, to make a contribution that'll help us run the help desk and support. We will commit all of our existing help desk and support capacity of that. It's about 1,500 schools, but if we want to give this to more than 1,500 schools, we're asking schools to make effectively a donation to help run the costs. So I want you to know that the AGSA offer is still there. It's still really important, and we couldn't bring that to you without help from the Alliance. But this is something a little bit different and a little bit more far-reaching, and we're really interested to hear if people would like to be involved. And on that note, I'd like to stop sharing my screen, I believe, Lauren.
Thanks, Joe.
And then any questions? And Lauren, you're going to broker the questions.
Sure, I can do that. So I think one of the most popular questions we've got here is, and perhaps Darren, this might be one for you with your experience. Is there a year group which is using this more than any other year?
So when we first were looking to take it on pre-COVID lockdown, we were going to trial it with a couple of our years in the secondary. We were going to trial it with year 10, and we were going to trial it with year 12. And then all of a sudden, as we saw that COVID coming on and what was going to happen with lockdown, we actually then rolled it out to every student years 5 to 12. So we run a middle school here, which is years 5 to 8, senior school 9 to 12. And we actually made it available to every student in years 5 to 12. So they currently all have access to it. They get a weekly reminder, and in one of their pastoral care classes midweek, I think it's Wednesday morning, the students are encouraged to take literally 2 minutes out of a pastoral care time on a Wednesday morning when they can all access it together. They're all in pastoral care, and then by the end of Wednesday, I've got a whole lot of data just in one hit at the end of a Wednesday, but then they can also use it throughout. So for us, we're using it through 5 to 12, even though we were originally going to trial it a little bit higher.
And a follow-up on that question is, would it be valuable using for years 7 to 9 to build support structures, and then for years 10 to 12 in self-efficacy?
Yes, I'm happy to speak to that, and then let Kelly speak as well. 100%. It's just been the student voice that we're receiving from this has just been exceptional, and like no other. And it's actually really quite meaningful. Like sometimes some of those surveys, you're then not really sure what to do with it, or you get it at one point in the year, whereas this now means actually, gosh, this is a real thing for these students in this cohort, because you can break it down per grade and class. And so you can now look and say, this is a real thing for this group of students. Wow, we can enact something now straight away. Like in our leadership, we then try to be agile enough that we can make maybe a little bit of a shift in our pastoral care approach for the following week, or maybe what was going to be the focus on an assembly or a chapel or something, so that we can actually address what they're speaking into. And the students, I think, for a student to actually give some feedback, and then within days or weeks, actually something happen with that, is really, really powerful. It actually says you matter, and it says we're hearing you and we're prepared to do what it takes to address your concern. So yeah, 100%. That's been our experience.
Kelly, did you want to add anything there? I might just get you, Kelly, to pop your microphone on.
Of course, I knew I would do that once, not turn it on. We actually went down a similar track to Darren. We decided, given the distance learning environment, that we would offer it to all our students in years 4 to year 12. My understanding is the psychometric testing that happened before this was rolled out suggested that it was appropriate for year 4 up. So that's the approach we've taken, and similar to Darren, although we're in the earlier stages, it's allowed us to respond to general trends across the school, but also look at individual year levels, and whether we need to be putting in place things for them. And of course, to answer the earlier question around if there's been one level in particular who's asked for help, not really, actually. And to be really honest, we've only had less than 5 students across the last 3 to 4 weeks who've asked for help. But we have seen, and this won't surprise anybody, a growing number of students move into the orange phase, which is, the I'm starting to feel like this is all a bit hard phase. And so we've been able to look at where they sit across the school, and then work with the heads of year on making sure that that year level is getting what they need.
Thank you,
if I just answer on that, I need help response. We found that we talked to the students initially about what they mean, because it's not like I need help because my learning's not, I need some help with some maths problems or whatever it be. We said we had to really just spend a little bit of time with each grade, just really unpacking the heart behind the questions and what they mean, so they don't just interpret I need help as, I want to make the soccer team, how can I make the soccer team type of thing. So yes, we just needed to unpack that a little bit with the students as well.
Yeah, an important difference there. Thanks for clarifying that. Another question here. I'm interested to hear how schools manage when students report they aren't coping and it's school holidays or the weekend. Well, I guess we've just had the perfect example of all of that during lockdown. Kelly, do you want to respond to that one?
Sure. We haven't had any holidays yet in this mode, so we haven't had that extended period. And like Darren, the data request goes to our students on a Monday, and the students understand that they're really expected to do that early in the week. So we haven't come across a case yet where students reached out for help over the holidays. Over the weekend. But as we're talking, it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that when we return, we need to remind the students, as we have been in the online space, of the resources that they have access to when they need help on the weekend. So we've been very clear, as I'm sure all schools have, in our wellbeing support information to the students in distance learning, that there are people that you can access at school, but those people aren't available to you outside of school hours. And when you feel you need help outside of school hours, here is where you go. So I think we need to be very clear as educators that, there are lines to that kind of thing, and Pulse is not an immediate response. It's a flag to the staff that you need some support in a timely way. If you need immediate help, there are other places to go, like Helpline, etc.
Can I just add there, Lauren, that when a student finishes or reaching out for help, it says we're letting that teacher know and they'll get back to you when they can. But if you need help right now, here's the number for Lifeline, here's the number for eHeads, here's the website for eHeadspace, and so on. So we do make sure they've got plenty of things in their immediately available arsenal. And the second thing is that we do try really hard to make sure it's framed with rules that it's an identify and refer type approach. It's not a long form counselling type of approach through the app. So it's really about connecting students with the existing frameworks in the school or around the school to help.
So apart from students being able to respond to those list of 5 questions, they also have the facility to initiate.
That's right. On that first screen, if they say, I'm not feeling great, I need some help, then we don't ask those 5 questions. We just go straight into, this is how you reach out for help.
And so another question here.
So Lauren, the reason we do ours on a Wednesday, sorry to interrupt, just so that people, can put things through a filter. We decided Wednesday because I don't feel great on a Monday morning. I'm not loving upon life on a Monday morning. And so we figured as a school that by about midweek, you're in sort of the zone or in the sort of the flow of, I'm back in school. And so, whereas I just imagined most people waking up on a Monday going, oh, geez, how do I feel? Not wonderful, because the last 2 days I was doing what I really wanted to do. And so that's why we pushed ours just a little bit to the middle of the week, just so that people can hear some different perspectives on that. We did have students have reached out on the weekend. And so when they do reach out for help, they get to nominate who they're reaching out to help to. And so we've got a list of 4 that they can reach out to. That person did respond with an email directing them to other services and things like that, and that we will see you on Monday morning type of thing. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that is a process that we're just trying to streamline a little bit.
Yeah, the midweek advice sounds very good for when the staff version comes out. Now, are there any issues to be mindful of around privacy and consent for students? Do parents need to give consent for the student to use the app and have their data recorded?
That's a really good question. So I'll answer, there's two sort of separate questions in there. So one is around data security and privacy. So we're both compliant with the Australian Privacy Policy Act and the European General Data Privacy Provisions, which is much more strenuous. We host all of our data in Australia and so on. We have a bunch of processes in place which are kind of outlined in our privacy policy. So we go above and beyond what's required of us to keep stuff safe. For consenting, there's an implicit consent for these sorts of things that we ask the school to make on behalf of the students, and that's okay under the Australian Privacy Act. We provide information and so on for schools to give on to their parents, so that the parents are aware of what's going on, and the parents, of course, could nominate to withdraw their kids from the program if that's what they wanted to do. So far, that's not happened. From a consent point of view, part of I'll just speak very briefly on this, but we do have a very simple child-friendly language in the consent thing. And the first time they log on to the app, we say, this is what's going to happen with your data. Now, we don't necessarily expect children, especially down at year 4, to be able to give informed consent, but we do want them to understand what's going to happen with their data. And so we make it very clear. Yeah, that's pretty much, I hope that's enough of an answer. I can talk more about it if you like.
No, I think that sounds like a great answer. Thanks, Joe. And we've got another question here, probably for you. Is Pulse available as a browser-based app? So can it be accessed from a laptop or a desktop, I guess, rather than just a mobile?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, at the moment, it's only available as a web-based app, and you use it through your phone and it has the sort of dynamic response stuff. We'll be releasing an app as soon as we can navigate our way through the Apple Store. And part of that is because it involves children, and that involves, and it's not a game apparently. And so that involves a certain extra levels of stuff. So yeah, it works inside your browser, on your iPad, on your iPhone, on your Android, all those different things.
And I think we pretty much answered this question, but I'll just quickly reconfirm. The youngest age group it's recommended for, I think the answer there was year 4. Yeah,
it was year 4. We came up with that for a couple of reasons. And one was, all of our other products that capture student responses, from year 3 and down, it's quite common for either a teacher or a teacher's aide or, a family member to help the students with their surveys. And we figured if the adult is going to engage enough with the student to help them fill out a survey, the last thing you want them to spend that time doing is filling out a survey. What you want them to do is have a wellbeing discussion with the child. So yeah, we don't recommend it for people under 4 because there's better things you can do with their time.
Can you get assistance to those who ask for it in a timely manner? What if, for example, there was a whole lot of calls about exam anxiety all at the same time?
Yeah, so actually, does anyone else want to answer that first?
I think it speaks to what Darren was saying before about making sure that the students understand what is going to happen when you say, I need help, and to try and help them to put their request for help into context. So we're really talking about, I need help beyond being able to access the services that already exist. That's how I've come to see it. And hopefully, if you're heading into exam period, there'd be an opportunity for wellbeing staff, pastoral care staff, whomever, to have a conversation with the students around what's coming up for them and remind them that Pulse is to be used for a particular purpose, and that if you need help with your academic anxiety, these are the places that you can go. Darren, do you think that's a reasonable response?
Yeah, that's a good response. So we have the way that we've structured schools, so they have do their Pulse check-in on a Wednesday morning, and then on a Wednesday afternoon is when our year leaders would meet with their head of school. So the year leaders from 9, 10, 11, 12 would meet with the pastoral care leader of senior school. They can pull up the data, so senior school head gets that data, and if all of a sudden all the students in year 12 say, I'm feeling negative, so you've got, I need help, but then above that, I'm feeling negative, I'm in the middle, I'm good type of thing. If all of a sudden all of year 12 said, I'm feeling negative, okay, well now, wow, okay, we can talk directly into that. And so we've structured it so that that afternoon is our pastoral care team leaders meetings, and they can then refer directly to the data that they would have received that morning, so that they can potentially do something with that the next morning in their pastoral care or at the assembly that would come up on the Monday, wherever it be like that. So if a large group of students identified exam stress, they would probably put, I'm feeling negative, or I'm in the middle. And if you had a whole lot in that space, then you would get to talk into it, as opposed to the general array of responses that you would normally expect. So yeah, so the I need help is really at the extreme end, like Kelly talked about, but then whereas if you've got a whole lot of, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, I've just got a couple more questions here, and we are running out of time. A few people have had to rush off to class already. So did you just want to add something quickly there, Kelly?
I was just going to say that when you set it up, you have the opportunity to choose, I think it's up to 4, Joe, people that the students can ask for help from. So our experience hasn't yet been that any one person's been overrun with it.
Yeah, and I think we've probably answered this question. Does Pulse send an automatic reply of some kind of message when the student asks for help outside of school hours? So I think you answered that before. Thanks, Kelly. Does the program provide any effective strategies for students until teacher intervention, or is it just purely diagnostic?
I'll answer that in really quickly in 2 parts. So one is at the point where they've finished asking for help, there's a couple of services that we can refer them to if they need more assistance, but it's not meant to supplant any of the existing tools or resources that are available for the students. The other thing that I wanted to say is that one of the reasons that we partner with Eracy so closely is that they offer fantastic training into schools for teachers to have those kinds of conversations that really help them understand whether they're in the role of someone who's going to resolve this issue or someone who's going to refer that issue, and then how that conversation takes place. So it's really important to arm your teachers with those things. Some schools have a really clear delineation between pastoral care and teaching, and some schools that line is less clear and the responsibility is less clear. But it's really important for teachers to know how to react as well, and that's where Eracy is invaluable to us as a partner.
Yeah, this is a good question. Can students update their responses every day during the week, or do they just get that one opportunity on the Wednesday, say, Darren?
They can do it all during the week. They can do it every day. They can do it a couple of times a day if they like, because they've got the link that they can they click on that link and that takes them to where they need to go. And so, yeah, we do have some students who give us a lot more regular feedback on how they're going than other students. Others will do it on the Wednesday when there's a bit of time set aside. And then there's others who use it every day or every few days and things like that. So yeah, it's accessible all the time, which is the beauty of it. Because if a student, it's a Friday afternoon or it's a whatever time and it's not on that Wednesday, it still means they can let someone know how they're going, and that a trusted adult will receive that can follow up.
And the data doesn't get removed, it just gets added to. So you can see if they've checked in 4 times, you get 4 little dots. And if they've checked in 10 times, it wraps.
Can schools modify the questions at all, Joe?
Oh, so that's a really good question. And the short answer is yes, but not yet. So all of our existing products, they all come on the same platform. All of our existing products let schools customize the questions. When COVID hit in particular, and we wanted to get this out in front of as many schools as possible, we kind of entrenched the position that we'd already taken, which was there's no shortage of frameworks. There's no shortage of really pretty good frameworks, and there's a couple of really excellent frameworks, including the Eracy one, which is hugely research-based. And we wanted to make sure that as a baseline, we were adding more light than heat by collecting this data. And so where we believe, we recommend to schools that they should use that framework. Over time, we will allow, there's 3 things that will allow schools to do. The first is to have like a question of the week. So just after the big question and then just before the 5 questions, an ability to say, you know, exams are coming up next week. How are you feeling about the exams? Or we've just launched the new swimming pool. I don't know, you know, whatever it is, just a sentiment meter, right? So that's one. The second is to be able to bias collection around one of those areas of wellbeing. So this week it's all about material basics. Next week it's all about being valued and safe. Next week it's all about identity and culture. And the third is to allow schools to say, actually, we don't want to use the ERACI framework. We want to use one of the other ones. It would be relatively straightforward for a school to convince us to use another existing framework that has a great evidentiary basis and all that sort of stuff. And it will be a slightly longer conversation, but one that we'll absolutely eventually acquiesce to, which is we've got our own wellbeing framework. We'd like to use it.
Thanks. And now just time for one last question. Is there a sense that the app creates a suggestion to students that they are heard immediately, a legally binding expectation with the associated risk that the college didn't look at and respond to the data for days? Is it enough that the text says otherwise in terms of mitigating legal risk?
So that's a really good question. I'll hand it to the schools first, but I've got a very strong opinion on this.
So as a school leader, each of the different people see different summaries on their pages. And so as the school leader, one of the summaries I do see is which students have reached out for help. And then I can click on that student's name and it shows me who they requested the help from and has that person done something with that yet. So as you know, so I was saying, so we've tried this since week 10, so I'm not sure how many weeks that is now. I mean, since week 6. So we're, I don't know how many weeks in, we've had 10 students reach out. And so I can see if that person has actually followed up and actioned the student's request for help. So from a school leader's perspective, I do get to see that information and then get to follow up with the staff member as to what the action was taken and where that information was logged. Like with most of our wellbeing teams and counsellors, etc., you know, they're keeping a log of who they spoke to and when and what was covered. And so that just forms part of that same reporting procedure that way.
Anything to add to that, Kelly?
I think Darren's done a great job. Yeah, we're responding in the same way.
Okay, so really, I think we should wrap it up. It's we've gone a little over time, and there's a couple of questions there, but Teva's managed to answer those. A couple that you'll like, Joe, because they're asking how they get to sign up. So really, I just want to say thank you, Kelly and Darren and Joe, for giving up your time and for being so generous with your wisdom. And to our wonderful listeners, how many have we got left? We've still got 90 there. So we did have 150 before. So I recognise that we've gone a little over time. We will be sending out a link to the recording and a short feedback survey afterwards. And also, you know, have a look at our website to see what other webinars we've got coming up. But otherwise, from me, it's stay safe and take care. And thank you again, panel, and goodbye.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again.